again, I'm Marianne Pitts. I'm with the Planning Department. Our team is working on the Code Refresh Project, which is the comprehensive update to the zoning ordinance. Where zoning is what you can do to your property, what you can build, what uses, how big it is. Thanks, Sid. I don't know if I want to bend over as many times as you have to go forward. So why we're updating the zoning, why we're doing this Code Refresh project. In 2020, we adopted Richmond 300. It's the citywide master plan that guides the growth of the city. It was after, started in 2017, so around 3 years of engagement with the community to figure out how we should guide future growth in the city. This Richmond 300 laid out a vision of a welcoming, inclusive, diverse, innovative, and sustainable and equitable city, and listed 6 big moves in order to achieve that. One of those was updating the zoning ordinance, because the last time we looked at the zoning ordinance was 1976, and there's aspects of it that don't contribute or allow easily for us to achieve this vision. Oh, I have animation on my slides too. So again, we are looking at the code. The last time we updated it was 1976. So it prohibits some of the things by right development. So something where you don't have to go through a special process isn't permitted with the existing zoning ordinance, or not in all areas in times of change. There is a history to zoning, especially in the city of Richmond, often exclusionary and segregating the city. And so we're working to fix some of those issues in the past. We're definitely trying not to repeat them, which is always what stresses me out and keeps me up at night, making sure that we're working towards creating a more equitable city and not replicating some past mistakes. Last 2 decades, we've seen a lot of people move into the city, a growing population and diversity within the city. We've also, not as much of an impact here, but that's something, because we're updating the zoning ordinance citywide for every parcel within the city. We've annexed the land, especially south of the river, that has a different development pattern, that has aging infrastructure, and figuring out what the future, especially of our south side, is going to be, as it's going to change over time. We're only 62.5 square miles. So unlike our surrounding counties, which have a lot of room to grow and develop and do different things, we're only 62.5 square miles. So we have to be careful about how we grow. We've been having this conversation, and I think it's come up a lot as we've been looking at the zoning ordinance, that we're kind of at this point where are we growing to this larger mid-sized city, or lots of people, or are we a smaller city, and how do we guide this growth? How much growth are we looking for? You know, we're so attractive, and we're getting a lot of people coming in, even though we're restricted to 62.5 square miles. So you'll hear in the conversations I'm sure you have with your neighbors, like what kind of city are we and what city should we plan for? One other thing that you'll hear oftentimes, the council declared a national housing crisis in 2023. We're looking for options for more places for people to live, more opportunities for people to live in all parts of the city. So the process, we began in 2024 by bringing a consultant team on board, so people who have worked on code, updating codes throughout the country, and also an engagement consultant that's helping us reach populations that typically don't participate in city processes or don't come to civic association meetings. Like, how do we reach those people that may not be connected to infrastructure? We began by creating a pattern book, which I feel has the most confusing name because it's not telling you what pattern you should be. It was just looking at existing conditions analysis. I think that's what we should call it, because it's looking at what's on the ground currently. A big part of that discussion was a lot of our neighborhoods built, and then the zoning came on top. And the zoning didn't even match what that form was. So oftentimes people have to come in, if you just want to build a single family home like your neighbors, you have to come in and get a special use permit or get around the zoning through that process. The pattern book shows really where there's concentrations of that in some of our neighborhoods that are the zone R5 and R6 to for single family neighborhoods. So that's what the pattern book looks at. Portions of your neighborhood are within this pattern book, so I can bring that. We can also have more discussion on it, but it's some baseline information that helps us figure out what the actual form is, especially in these neighborhoods that we want to continue with us. We also worked through May through February creating the zoning framework, creating some zoning districts. In March through now, we've been working on the draft information. So we're currently creating this draft order, and it looks like every time I do this slide, I hate it because it looks like we're done. We're really just in the meat of it, and probably the thing that's the most understandable and easy to comment and provide direction for us on is right now at this point in time. So this last part of the process, creating the draft, is coming in 3 modules. The first module, which is information that was shared at public open houses at the end of June, are the districts, a draft map, and draft use table. The next module, which the consulting team is working on, is the development standards. So these are citywide standards, including landscaping, transition. A big thing that I think is going to be very informative is how do we transition from our commercial districts, our more mixed-use districts, to our more residential districts. And we're looking at setting back and step backs. So they're exploring that, signage. This is all coming as a part of the development standard. And then module 3 is administrative provision and other provisions. So how are we going to use this ordinance? And what are those tools if we need to, if you don't comply with the zoning? So that'll be a part of that module. Right now, module 1 is all online with your ability to comment through September 10th, just so we have an opportunity to take those comments. And the hard part of figuring out how to make the changes based on those comments to get something back in November. In November, we'll be bringing back the revised material in addition to those development standards, the draft form, and the administrative provisions. Ultimately, City Council will ultimately approve the zoning ordinance sometime next year. So Richmond 300, as I mentioned, is the citywide master plan. One thing you'll see, the image on the left, is the future land use map. Future land use map guides the growth with 10 broad categories. So the yellow is our residential, the beige is our neighborhood mixed use. These are broad categories that have a range of heights, a range of uses within these categories, and the zoning is where we're going to dive down to get into some of those details. So you might see a community mixed use category that talks about 2 to 6 stories. It doesn't mean that a 6-story building is what it's going to be zoned for. It's just applied in different parts of the city and different things might be appropriate. I'm going to briefly go through all the districts, and if you guys have, similar to other presentations, so I apologize if you've already seen some of this, but I think it's helpful for everyone to see. The residential detached districts. Our first district, the RC district, our residential cottage district, is the district that is replacing our current mobile home district. So it requires smaller units and allows for multiple on one lot. Currently, when you see the map, it's only mapped where there's existing mobile home development. It hasn't been used to map elsewhere, but we're exploring whether it's a tool that could be used to bring a different style of housing, more affordable housing, than something that would actually be used. We have working groups that are helping us through this process. Karen and Buster are on our High Quality Places working group. We also have a housing working group, and they've taken a look at whether this is an actual tool to be used. So we're still evaluating this one. Then we have 3 more standard residential detached districts: RDA, RDB, and RDC. The difference between each of those is the minimum lot width. And the RDA, the low, requires a 90-foot lot width as a minimum. RDB, 50. RDC, 25. On each of these lots, it's proposed that permitted to have 2 dwelling units and an accessory dwelling unit on each of these lots. Not required, but that would allow for 2 dwelling units and an accessory dwelling unit, which is a change from what current zoning allows for. Another change, my goal is to be as transparent about what's changing as possible. Another change is relying on lot width, understanding that like developments related to the infrastructure running on the ground, it doesn't have a standard for lot area. And there currently are lot area standards. In terms of those units, looking at the 2 dwelling units plus the accessory, conversations have been had about how that layout should occur, and they're still happening. Whether it has to be in one structure with the 2 equal-sized dwelling units and the smaller dwelling unit at the rear, whether it could be 2 equal-sized dwelling units side by side, behind, front and behind. These are things we're looking at, or whether, like this conversation is ever evolving and probably dominating a lot of the conversation. The thought is that allowing for a slight increase in density in some of our traditional single-family neighborhoods would allow for more housing to be in different neighborhoods where it currently isn't. So this incremental increase in density is what the goal of allowing for the 2 dwelling units and an accessory dwelling unit, the opportunity for that. Our attached districts, we have 3 attached districts, and for the detached Height-wise, it's 35 feet or 3 stories. 35 feet is currently what's allowed in our existing single-family districts. Residential attached districts, again, we have 3 of these. They vary. The first allows for 2 dwelling units and an accessory dwelling unit, like our detached, but also allows for an attached building form. Our AB allows for 6 dwelling units per building. So if there's a lot large enough to allow for multiple buildings, it could be more than 1 6 dwelling unit building. Our AC allows for 12 dwelling units per building. There's no lot width requirements in any of these districts. They also allow for, in the proposed, to allow for limited commercial, so up to 1,500 square feet of commercial is in the current proposal. The mixed-use districts are a little easier because the numbers reflect what the height is being permitted. The RX districts are speaking to primarily residential buildings, allowing for ground floor commercial. So RX4 would allow for a 4-story, either solely residential building or residential commercial on the ground. RX6 allows for a 6-story building. The MX districts are our mixed-use districts that allows for residential, commercial, a mix. It could be a solely commercial office building or something like that. In the MX, it begins with a 3-story height, a 6-story height, and there's an 8, a 13, and the MXU is unlimited, so very substantial. You'll see it mapped some of the more high intensity along our Richmond 300 has this concept of nodes and priority growth nodes when we're targeting growth, and also along the transit corridors, making that connection between density and transit, people being able to access jobs and
Quick question. The MXs, is there a lot width requirement on those two, or are they just do what they like?
Right. Let me just double check.
Do what they like?
I think we have lot width requirements. I think the lot width requirements are only currently in the. Yes, no lot width requirements.
No lot.
Again, everything's a draft. These documents are online, especially if you're interested in some of the standards to get into the details of those. One thing, as I mentioned before, right now we're doing the development standards. The transition standards might affect, so if something is MX6 but is abutting residential, there would be some requirement about it having to be set back and maybe upper story step backed from that surrounding residential. So the impact of the height wouldn't be felt as much on the adjacent residential property. The potential to get all the way up to 6 stories may not occur in some instances. This is something we're looking at. I just want to put that out there so as you look at the districts that the height may be a different impact. The next set of districts are like the Scott Citizen neighborhood, generally speaking, before the IX districts. The master plan had a land use designation, industrial mixed use, recognizing we have these neighborhoods that are transitioning from industrial to a mixed use character more, but still allowing for some of that light industrial to remain. So this is what these districts do. They allow for the light industrial to remain, but also recognize that apartments can be there, commercial can be there. Scott's Addition, Manchester, as we're changing over time. So IX6 at 6 stories, IX8 at 8 stories. We do have traditional industrial districts, so the industrial light is primarily interior buildings, kind of industrial uses. Industrial heavy is more high impact, large footprint industrial uses. And then there's the CG4, which I think we just call CG now, but the commercial general is one district that we're still exploring where and how it can be used. It allows for more auto-oriented uses and a more auto-oriented, car-oriented layout. The master plan is like visionary, pushing for in 2037 what the city should be, calling for really all walkable neighborhoods of human scale. So it doesn't really call for this type of development, but we recognize things may not change immediately over time, and there might be a need to allow for some of it to remain. You'll see it's not mapped in very many places, but it's one of the districts that maybe we should have and figure out how we can map it better. Then our institutional, open space, and cemetery districts. Institutional, yes, ma'am.
I'm so sorry. Just going back to the light industrial districts, I know that master plan district is that diamond revitalization. is there an anticipated ratio of green space walkability? So like for every percentage they're putting up that sort of 4 to 8 story multifamily, that they're also ensuring like 20% of it has a green space ratio to offset?
See, the details of the Diamond District, I know there's lots of like shared open spaces as part of that project. I don't know all the percentages, but also the new zoning ordinance is proposing to require amenity space.
Oh, perfect.
Currently, we have a usable open space requirement, which allows like balconies to count towards it. Like, to be honest, like that doesn't really get to what we've been hearing. So this is proposing to allow for, to encourage community space, pedestrian accessible, providing like trees, benches, making habitable. Another one of our working groups, and our working groups are open, so if anybody's interested in some of the nitty gritty of this, our environment one was looking at how we can modify some of that language to encourage really more green, less hostile spaces, requiring that. You have to provide things that make it more accessible. That's what's currently being proposed, but we're working towards making that better than currently, where like you can't put in your balconies, you can count towards your usable open space.
So green roofs, are those at all a factor in terms of, I can't necessarily make the proportion of setback requirements that as an alternative?
We've been, yes, and I think as a part of the development standards, we're going to get into a little bit more details of how we create them.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Institutional, I just want to draw your attention to, because the current institutional zoning is only really used for larger institutions because it speaks to the creation of a master plan. So VUU is institutionally zoned and they have to bring their master plan. The new zoning ordinance is proposing to have institutional refer to all civic uses. So you're going to see it mapped a whole lot more. And it's also mapped over churches. One of the permitted uses currently being proposed is to allow for housing in institutional as a permitted use. So as you look at the map and you consider this institutional district, this is another one that I always point out, like I think you need to think about, and it speaks to, this one, its height is reflective of the surrounding neighborhood. So if a church changes or wants to do more, it can stay that institutional but allow for different uses. It's currently how it's proposed, but it's a different use of a district. Even though we have institutional currently, it's barely mapped. But going forward, it's going to be used more. Open space is for publicly owned open space, so just acknowledging it and putting it on the map. It's not going to include privately owned open space. It doesn't make that. And then the cemetery uses for both public and private cemeteries. Right, so this is, hopefully I have the boundaries of your civic association, because they're different than our neighborhood, Northern Barton Heights boundaries. This is your neighborhood, so the majority of the area is that residential land use, so acknowledging that it's primarily residential with single family, potentially duplexes, other uses in the neighborhood, where with some commercial corridors, so that community mixed use. The micronode concept and the other nodes concept. Some of our nodes are high priority growth nodes, you'll see a definite bump in density there, but other ones are just where they're centers of community that is acknowledged in the plan over. You'll see also one thing I wanted to point out, that purple line and on north is the enhanced transit. So the master plan called for additional transit to go along that street. So you'll see that's why in a couple seconds you'll see a little bit a higher zoning district along north because connecting that to the transit. Existing zoning, we have R6 and an R5. Mainly residential, single-family residential in the R5 areas, and R6 is our single and two-family residential district with some urban business, which is a lower scale, and some B2, some lower scale commercial. This is the proposed draft zoning map, so the one you'll be able to go into and leave your comments on online. How this map was created, one, Richmond 300, so there's future land use designations where they enhance transit. There's another concept of major streets where potentially more density. That was the guide. Two, we looking at the existing zoning what permissions are currently afforded to you on your existing property. 3, what's on the ground. And these were all what was looked at in the creation of this zoning and how the lots are laid out. That was what was looked at in the creation of this map. So there might also, some assumptions were made looking at things. Some of it was done by our consultant who isn't local, and like local staff was fact checking against any red flags. So there might be like some errors that look really apparent to you. So please take the time to look closely at the map. We're going back and looking for it here. So along the corridor where those commercial areas are is primarily supposed to be rezoned MX3. So that's that 3-story mixed use, allowing for commercial, a mix of commercial and residential. Along north, you'll see where I was talking about before, the RAB, so allowing for residential uses up to 6 units per building, allowing along north. RAA is that residential attached district, not requiring an attached format, but allowing for that up to 2 dwelling units and an accessory dwelling unit on a lot. And the RDC, similar 2 dwelling units and accessory on a lot, but at the 25-foot lot width requirements. You'll see some RX4. Now I have to know why some of them I was like, I don't know why we did everything. It might be acknowledging the existing R53 zoning. You'll see some institutional uses. I did want to share, so the draft map uses and district information is online. We're going to do all the process that I talked about before. There's also, if communities are interested, we've heard a concern about demolition. We've heard a concern about historic preservation and future design of what comes back. So we're looking, there are other tools. At first we were going to get the base zoning. And if you look at the base zoning, you'll see more form-based things. So you'll be a little more confident that if a new building comes, that it'll have better design elements because we're trying to bake that into the base zoning. But there's also opportunities to a demolition review district. It's not going to prevent demolition, but it's going to make it take a little bit longer. 2, the design overlay districts. So if there's things that are important for you as a neighborhood when new construction comes or even rehab that needs to be looked at, that could be something we work together on. And 3, an old and historic district. I don't know if you know of the old and historic districts. They require the review of the architectural review for exterior changes. Really, the goal is to preserve that historic fabric and new development to be compatible. These are all tools we can have conversations about. Originally, like I was saying, we were going to get everything in place and then we'll come back. We recognize that communities want the assurance that if we're comfortable with the zoning, these other things might need to be in place simultaneously. So if we're interested in that, we can have conversations. The fall, which I realize the fall is like almost here, so I keep saying that. But we're working right now on getting a 2-pager on like what our existing tools are and what potential other tools could be that we can have to you. The goal is to have it done by August 8th, so we'll have it to you probably before you guys meet in August. We can have that to you by then. But I just want to share that because it's not really on any of our maps. The next few slides is more for you guys to have. I don't know if you can see too well. I apologize if it's small. Kind of summarizing each of the districts that are relevant to your neighborhood. One thing I wanted to share, kind of this form-based element of making sure new development is better. The setbacks, that if you go into where there's an existing context, you have to match those standards with that existing range. There's a building coverage percentage that I'm not sure we got right. Feels it's higher than what's currently there, and it's one of the things we've asked the consultants to even before we close the comment period, that we need to look at that because it's a lot higher than in all the districts. So we'll see that number. So all the districts are here. I'm going to take a is my contact information. Please send me an email or give me a call if you have any questions, if you're struggling with anything going on in your life.